Newlywed Gwenda Reed steps into Hillside, her dream home, only to be haunted by visions of a strangled woman and a whispered name, Lily. As buried memories of a childhood tragedy surface, Miss Marple unravels a chilling secret. A murder hidden for decades with a killer still watching. Can Gwenda face the past before it claims her future? Chapter 1. The House on the Hill. A soft October light filtered through the mullioned windows of Hillside, a gracious Victorian house nestled on a rise above Dilmouth's winding lanes. Gwenda Reed stood alone in the entrance hall, her small, neat figure dwarfed by the oak-panelled walls. At 21, with bright eyes and a cascade of dark curls, she carried the air of someone poised for adventure. She and her husband, Raymond Reed, had arrived from New Zealand only weeks ago, drawn to this seaside town by the promise of a new beginning. Hillside, with its gabled roof and rose-choked garden, had captivated them from the estate agents. Description alone. Yet now, as Gwenda's footsteps echoed on the polished floor, a strange disquiet settled over her, as if the house were watching. She moved into the parlour, where dust sheets still draped the furniture, and paused by a tall window overlooking the lawn. Without warning, a vision struck her. A woman, young and fair-haired, lay crumpled at the base of the grand staircase in the hall, her eyes wide with terror, a livid mark encircling her throat. A man's voice, low and venomous, whispered, "Lily." Gwenda gasped, gripping the window ledge. The scene dissolved, leaving only the quiet room and her racing pulse. She shook her head, as if to dislodge the image. She had never been to England before this journey. How could such a picture feel so real, so intimate? "Gwenda, you look positively haunted," Raymond called, striding in with a stack of books under his arm. His easy smile and rumpled fair hair softened the room's severity. "Is the house playing tricks on you already?" She managed a weak smile, brushing a curl from her forehead. "It's nothing, really. Just an odd feeling, like I've been here before." She hesitated, unwilling to share the full weight of the vision. Raymond was practical, a man of facts and figures. He'd likely blame her nerves or the sea voyage. He set the books on a table and drew her into a light embrace. Old places like this have a knack for stirring the imagination. Give it a week, and you'll be rearranging furniture like a proper English housewife. His teasing tone coaxed a laugh from her, but her gaze drifted to the hall, where the staircase loomed in shadow. After lunch, with Raymond engrossed in correspondence, Gwenda explored further. The house was a labyrinth of high-ceilinged rooms and narrow passages, each corner heavy with the scent of aged wood and wax polish. A side corridor, she noticed a door, its edges sealed with paint so old it flaked at her touch. A sudden urge gripped her. She retrieved a chisel from Raymond's toolkit and worked at the door, her breath quickening as the paint gave way. The door creaked open, revealing a shallow alcove. On its back wall, half hidden by cobwebs, was a strip of wallpaper. Delicate primroses, their petals a soft gold against a mossy green. Gwenda's heart lurched. She knew this pattern, though no memory could place it. It was as if a fragment of her past had been locked away, waiting for her to find it. She closed the alcove, her hands unsteady, and stepped into the garden to clear her mind. The air was crisp, scented with salt from the nearby sea. She wandered past overgrown flower beds to a sunken corner where a broken fountain stood sentinel. Her foot caught on a loose stone, and she knelt, brushing away dirt to reveal a faint carving, a heart pierced by an arrow. A chill traced her spine. She rose, glancing back at Hillside's windows, which seemed to gleam with quiet menace. That evening, as she and Raymond dined on cold ham and salad, Gwenda's thoughts churned. She could not shake the primroses, the carved heart, or the woman at the stairs. After Raymond retired to read, she sat at the mahogany desk in the study, the lamplight casting long shadows. She took up a pen and wrote to Mr. Forster, her guardian in New Zealand, who had cared for her since her father's death when she was 7. "Dear Mr. Forster," she began, "I am settled in Dilmouth, but something troubles me. Can you confirm if I ever lived in England as a child, perhaps here? Any details of my father's life would help." She sealed the letter, her resolve firming. Hillside held a secret, and she would not rest until it was hers. Chapter 2. The Stranger's Tale. The morning mist clung to Dilmouth's cobbled streets as Gwenda Reed made her way to the vicarage, her footsteps muffled by the damp air. The unease that had gripped her at Hillside the previous day lingered, sharpened by the discovery of the primrose wallpaper and the carved stone in the garden. She had barely slept, her dreams troubled by fleeting images of a fair-haired woman and a shadowed staircase. Raymond, ever practical, had urged her to distract herself with furnishings or a walk. But Gwenda's mind was fixed on answers. The vicarage, home to the elderly Reverend Mr. Pennington, seemed a logical place to begin. Surely he would know the history of Hillside and its former occupants. The vicarage was a modest Georgian house, its brick façade softened by climbing roses. Gwenda knocked, her gloved hand trembling slightly, and was greeted by a housekeeper, Mrs. Bates, whose round face creased into a welcoming smile. "The vicar's at the church, miss, preparing for the fete," she said, ushering Gwenda inside. "But you're welcome to wait. There's a guest here, Miss Marple, who might keep you company." Gwenda entered a cosy sitting room, its walls lined with books, and a fire crackling in the grate. At a small table sat an elderly woman, delicate as a bird, with snow-white hair pinned neatly beneath a lace cap. Her hands moved deftly over a piece of knitting, the needles clicking in a steady rhythm. Her eyes, pale blue and disconcertingly sharp, met Gwenda's with a warmth that belied their scrutiny. "Good morning, my dear," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I am Jane Marple, visiting from St. Mary Mead. You must be Mrs. Reed, the new owner of Hillside. Do sit down." Gwenda hesitated, then took the offered chair, smoothing her skirt. "How did you know who I am?" she asked, unable to mask her surprise. Miss Marple's lips curved in a faint smile. "Dilmouth is a small place, and newcomers are a topic of interest. Mrs. Bates mentioned you and your husband just now. Besides, you have the look of someone with a purpose, and perhaps a question or two." She set her knitting aside, folding, her hands in her lap. "I find young people often come to vicarages seeking answers, though not always about sermons." Gwenda laughed, a nervous sound that echoed in the quiet room. Miss Marple's perceptiveness was unnerving, yet there was a kindness in her manner that invited trust. "You're right," Gwenda admitted. "I came to ask the vicar about my house. It's unsettling me, and I don't know why." She paused, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger. But Miss Marple's attentive silence was like a gentle pull, coaxing the words out. "It started yesterday," Gwenda began, her voice low. "I had a sort of vision in the parlour. A woman lying dead at the foot of the stairs, strangled, with a man's voice saying Lily. It was so real, but I've never been to England before. Then I found an old alcove with primrose wallpaper, and I knew it, though I can't explain how. In the garden there was a stone with a heart carved on it, and it felt ominous. I wrote to my guardian in New Zealand to ask if I ever lived here as a child, but I'm afraid of what I might learn." Miss Marple listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving Gwenda's face. When Gwenda finished, the older woman nodded, slowly, as if fitting pieces into an invisible puzzle. "That is most intriguing," she said. "The mind is a curious thing, Mrs. Reed. It can bury memories so deeply we think them lost, only for them to surface when we least expect it. This vision of yours, do you think it was a fancy or something more?" Gwenda shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "It felt like a memory, but that's impossible. I was raised in New Zealand. My father died when I was 7, and I don't remember any time in England. Yet the primroses, the staircase, it's as if I've lived in Hillside before." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharpening. "Let us consider this logically. You are young, newly married, and in a strange country. It would be easy to dismiss your experience as nerves or imagination. But I have seen too much of human nature to believe everything is so simple. If you have no recollection of England, yet these images are so vivid, it suggests you may have been here as a very young child, before your conscious memory took hold. The primrose wallpaper and the carved stone are tangible clues. They anchor your vision to Hillside itself." Gwenda's eyes widened. "You think I might have lived there? But why wouldn't I know?" "Children forget," Miss Marple said, gently. "Or they are made to forget, sometimes for their own protection. Your father's death, you say. Do you know how he came to be in New Zealand?" Gwenda shook her head. "Only that he was a widower when he married my mother, who died when I was born. He raised me alone until he passed, and Mr. Forster, his solicitor, took me in. I never thought to ask about England. It seemed so far away." Miss Marple's knitting needles resumed their soft clicking, a counterpoint to her measured words. "Then your letter to Mr. Forster is a wise step. But you must be careful, my dear. If your vision is indeed a memory, and if it points to a crime, you may be stirring something dangerous. Houses, you see, are like people. They hold their secrets tightly, and those secrets do not always wish to be found." Gwenda felt a chill, though the fire burned brightly. "You think there was a murder at Hillside, I think," Miss Marple said, choosing her words with care. "That your mind is trying to tell you something. Whether it is a murder, or merely a child's distorted recollection, we cannot yet say. But I would advise you to proceed with caution. Speak to those who knew Hillside in years past. Servants, neighbours, anyone who might recall its history, and trust your instincts. They have brought you this far." Mrs. Bates bustled in with a tray of scones and tea, breaking the tension. "Here you are, ladies. The vicar won't be back for an hour, but you're welcome to stay." She set the tray down and retreated, humming to herself. Gwenda poured tea, her hands steadier now. "You're very kind to listen, Miss Marple. I feel a bit foolish, pouring out my troubles to a stranger." "Not at all," Miss Marple said, accepting a cup. "I have a habit of being in the right place when people need to talk. In my village, you see, I've learned that the smallest details, a word, a glance, can unravel the most tangled knots. Your story reminds me of a young woman in St. Mary Mead who once found a locket in her garden. It led to quite a discovery, though I won't bore you with that now." Her eyes twinkled, but Gwenda sensed a depth of experience behind the mild words. They sipped their tea in companionable silence, the scones untouched. Gwenda felt a curious relief, as if sharing her fears had lightened their weight. Miss Marple's presence was oddly reassuring, like a lighthouse in a storm. Yet her warning echoed, "Something dangerous." Gwenda resolved to follow her advice, starting with the townsfolk who might know Hillside's past. As they finished their tea, the door opened and a tall, stooped figure entered. The Reverend Mr. Pennington, his white hair haloed by the morning light. "Mrs. Reed, how delightful," he said, his voice warm but reedy. "Mrs. Bates said you'd called. I hope I haven't kept you waiting." Gwenda rose, smoothing her coat. "Not at all, Vicar. I was hoping you might know something about Hillside, my new home, its history perhaps, or who lived there years ago." Mr. Pennington's face clouded briefly, as if a memory had stirred. "Hillside, yes, a fine house, though it stood empty for some time. Let me think. There was a family there, 15 or 20 years back. Halliday, I believe, a military man with a young wife. Tragic business, as I recall. She left him, or so the gossip went, and he moved away soon after. I'm afraid my memory isn't what it was. The church records might tell you more." Gwenda's heart quickened at the name Halliday. Could it be her father? She pressed further, but the vicar's recollections were vague, muddled by time. "Thank you," she said, masking her disappointment. "I'll check the records, and perhaps ask around town." Miss Marple, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "A splendid idea, Mrs. Reed. Old servants especially have long memories. They see things others miss." She gathered her knitting, her movements precise. "I shall be in Dilmouth for the fete, and perhaps a little longer. If you need me, the vicarage knows where to find me." Gwenda thanked her, feeling a pang of gratitude for this unexpected ally. As she left the vicarage, the mist was lifting, revealing Dilmouth's rooftops and the distant sparkle of the sea. She walked briskly, her mind racing. The name Halliday was a thread, thin but tangible. She would visit the church, seek out former servants, and await Mr. Forster's reply. But Miss Marple's words haunted her. Those secrets do not always wish to be found. Back at Hillside, Raymond was sorting through crates in the dining room, his sleeves rolled up. "Any luck with the vicar?" he asked, glancing up. Gwenda hesitated, then recounted the visit, omitting Miss Marple's warning. "He mentioned a family named Halliday, who lived here years ago. A man and his wife. She left him, apparently. It might be nothing, but I want to know more." Raymond frowned, setting down a candlestick. "You're really taken with this, aren't you? Be careful, darling. Chasing ghosts can make you forget the present." His tone was gentle, but Gwenda sensed his unease. She nodded, forcing a smile, and excused herself to write down the vicar's words before they faded. Upstairs, in the bedroom overlooking the garden, she sat at a small desk, her notebook open. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. As she wrote, her eyes strayed to the window, where the sunken garden lay in shadow. The carved stone seemed to pulse in her memory, a silent witness to something she could not yet name. She shivered, drawing her shawl closer, and turned back to her notes. That night, as she lay beside Raymond, sleep eluded her. The vision of the strangled woman returned, sharper now, the man's voice clearer. Lily! But another image followed, a child's small hand clutching a railing, peering through banisters at a scene below. Gwenda's breath caught. Was that child herself? She closed her eyes, willing the images away, but they lingered, as persistent as the primrose wallpaper hidden behind a sealed door. In the days to come, she would pursue the Halliday name, seek out those who had known Hillside, and unravel the thread Miss Marple had helped her find. But for now, in the quiet darkness of Hillside, Gwenda felt the weight of a past she could not yet claim, pressing against her like a hand in the night. Chapter 3. Echoes of the Past. The sea breeze carried a tang of salt through Dilmouth's narrow streets as Gwenda Reed sat at the breakfast table, a letter from New Zealand spread before her. It had arrived that morning, its thin airmail paper creased from the long journey. Her hands trembled as she reread the words from Mr. Forster, her guardian, whose precise handwriting seemed to anchor her swirling thoughts. Raymond, absorbed in his newspaper, glanced up, his brow furrowing at her pallor. "Bad news, darling?" he asked, setting aside the paper. Gwenda shook her head, forcing a smile. Not bad, just surprising. She hesitated, then slid the letter toward him. "It's about my father. He did live in England, here in Dilmouth, when I was 3, with his second wife, Helen. They rented a house, possibly Hillside. She disappeared, and he took me to New Zealand soon after. He died when I was 7. Her voice wavered, the weight of the revelation pressing against her chest. Raymond scanned the letter, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Disappeared? That's rather dramatic. What does Forster say about it?" "He says the police thought Helen ran off, perhaps with another man. Father was devastated, drank heavily, and left for New Zealand to start over. Forster doesn't know much more, only that Father never spoke of Helen after we left." Gwenda's fingers traced the edge of the letter. "But Raymond, if we lived at Hillside, that vision I had, the woman at the stairs, the primrose wallpaper, it might be real. I might have seen something as a child." Raymond leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Gwenda, you were 3. Children. Imagine all sorts of things. You're letting this house get under your skin." He reached for her hand, his touch warm but firm. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Why don't you focus on curtains or that garden you love? I'll handle the solicitor's paperwork today." Gwenda nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The letter confirmed what Miss Marple had suggested at the vicarage. Her connection to Hillside was no coincidence. The vision, the alcove, the carved stone, they were fragments of a past she had buried. She resolved to share the letter with Miss Marple, whose sharp insight had already steadied her. After Raymond left for his appointment, Gwenda tucked the letter into her purse and set out for the vicarage, where Miss Marple was staying for the church fete. The town was bustling, with shopkeepers sweeping doorsteps and children darting through alleys. Gwenda's thoughts churned as she walked, the letter's revelations intertwining with the vicar's vague mention of the Halliday family. At the vicarage, Mrs. Bates greeted her with a cheerful nod. "Miss Marple's in the garden, dear. She's been expecting you, I think." Gwenda found Miss Marple seated on a wrought-iron bench, a straw hat shielding her eyes as she tended to a skein of pale blue wool. The garden was a riot of late roses and dahlias, their colours vivid against the grey stone wall. Miss Marple looked up, her smile gentle but knowing. "Mrs. Reed, how timely! I was just thinking of you. You have news, I suspect?" Gwenda sat beside her, pulling the letter from her purse. "I do. My guardian wrote back. My father, Major Kelvin Halliday, lived in Dilmouth with his wife Helen when I was a toddler. They may have rented Hillside. Helen vanished. People thought she eloped, and father took me away. It's all so strange, Miss Marple. I feel like I'm remembering things I shouldn't know." Miss Marple took the letter, her eyes scanning the lines with quiet intensity. She folded it carefully, handing it back. "This is significant, my dear. Your vision, the primrose wallpaper, the carved stone, they suggest a memory, however fragmented. But we must be cautious. A disappearance is rarely as simple as gossip makes it. Helen's departure, if it was a departure, may have left ripples that are still felt." Gwenda's throat tightened. "You mean someone might have made her disappear?" Miss Marple's gaze was steady, her hands still on the wool. "I mean that human nature is complex. People vanish for many reasons, love, fear, or something darker. If your vision is a true memory, it points to violence. And if Helen was harmed, the person responsible may still be in Dilmouth, watching you stir the past." She paused, her voice softening. "You are brave to pursue this, but courage needs care. Have you spoken to anyone else about Hillside's history?" "Not yet," Gwenda said. "The vicar mentioned the Hallidays, but he was vague. I thought I'd ask around town. Maybe find someone who worked at Hillside or knew Helen." "A sensible plan," Miss Marple said, her needles resuming their soft click. "Servants, especially, see the undercurrents of a household. There's a Mrs. Cocker in Dilmouth, a retired housekeeper who worked for several families here. She's elderly now, but her memory is sharp. You might start with her, and the church records could confirm if the Hallidays lived at Hillside. But, my dear, do not go alone. Take your husband or perhaps a friend. Secrets can make people unpredictable." Gwenda nodded, grateful for the advice. Miss Marple's calm authority was like a map through fog, guiding her without overwhelming her. "I'll visit Mrs. Cocker today," she said, "and I'll check the records. Thank you, Miss Marple, and I don't know why you're helping me, but I'm glad you are." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Let us say I have a fondness for puzzles, especially those involving young people in need. In my village, I've seen how small clues, a misplaced word, a nervous glance, can unravel great mysteries. Your story reminds me of a case involving a lost brooch, but that's neither here nor there." She waved a hand, dismissing the tangent. "Go carefully, Mrs. Reed, and if you learn anything, I shall be here." Gwenda left the vicarage with a renewed sense of purpose. The sun had burned away the morning haze, and Dilmouth's streets gleamed with autumn light. She stopped at the church, a grey stone edifice with a squat tower, and found the clerk, a wiry man named Mr. Tuttle, sorting hymnals. He was happy to help, leading her to a dusty ledger in the vestry. "Halliday, you say," he muttered, flipping pages. "Here we are. Major Kelvin Halliday, wife Helen, resident at Hillside, 1907 to 1908. Baptized a child, Gwendolen, in '07. That'd be you, I reckon?" Gwenda's heart raced. "Yes, that's me. Is there anything else?" Mr. Tuttle squinted at the page. "Not much. They left sudden-like after Mrs. Halliday went off. Gossip said she had a lover, but I never held with that. She seemed a kind lady, from what I saw at services." He closed the ledger, dust rising in a faint cloud. You might ask Mrs. Cocker down at Rose Cottage. She knew everyone's business back then. Thanking him, Gwenda made her way to Rose Cottage, a tidy dwelling with a thatched roof and a garden bursting with chrysanthemums. Mrs. Cocker, a stout woman in her 70s with a face like a wrinkled apple, welcomed her with a cup of strong tea and a plate of biscuits. "Hillside, eh?" she said, settling into a creaking armchair. "I remember it well. Worked there as a cook for the Hallidays I did before they left. Fine folk, though troubled." Gwenda leaned forward, her cup untouched. "Troubled how? I'm trying to learn about them, especially Helen Halliday." Mrs. Cocker's eyes narrowed, as if weighing how much to share. "Helen was a beauty. Golden hair, bright as a summer day, but a bit wild, like she was chasing something she couldn't find. The Major doted on her, but he was often away, military business. When she vanished, folks said she'd run off with some man. Broke the Major's heart, it did. He left with you, a wee thing, clinging to his hand, and that was that." "Did you ever suspect anything else?" Gwenda asked, her voice low. "That she didn't run away?" Mrs. Cocker hesitated, her fingers tightening on her cup. "I wondered, truth be told. Helen wasn't the sort to leave without a word, not with you so small. There was talk of her brother, Dr. Kennedy, being against her marriage. He lived nearby, always visiting, watching her like a hawk. Proper devoted, but not in a good way, if you take my meaning. After she went, he stayed on, shut himself up in that big house of his." Gwenda's pulse quickened. "Dr. Kennedy, is he still in Dilmouth?" "Aye, up at Cliff House, though he keeps to himself. Retired now, but folks say he's as sharp as ever." Mrs. Cocker leaned closer, her voice dropping. "If you're digging into Helen's story, miss, watch your step. Some folks don't like old wounds reopened." Gwenda thanked her and left, the weight of Mrs. Cocker's words settling over her. Dr. Kennedy's name was a new thread, tangled with the mystery of Helen's disappearance. She decided to visit him, though the thought made her stomach twist. First, she returned to Hillside, where Raymond was unpacking books in the library. "You've been busy," he said, eyeing her flushed cheeks. "Find anything?" she recounted, her morning, the church records, Mrs. Cocker's story, and Dr. Kennedy's name. Raymond listened, his expression darkening. "Gwenda, this is getting out of hand. You're chasing shadows. What if this Kennedy fellow is just a lonely old man? You can't go accusing people based on gossip." "I'm not accusing anyone," she said, her voice sharp. "I just want to know what happened. If Helen was my stepmother and I saw something, I need to understand it." Raymond sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, but don't go alone. I'll come with you to see this doctor, if you insist. Tomorrow, after I've sorted the deeds." Gwenda agreed, though she felt a flicker of impatience. Raymond's caution was sensible, but it chafed against her need to act. That afternoon, she walked to the edge of town where Cliff House stood, a gaunt red-brick mansion overlooking the sea. Its windows were shuttered, its garden overgrown. She didn't knock, but stood at the gate, studying the house. A curtain twitched in an AHR upstairs window, and she stepped back, her heart pounding. Someone was watching. Back at Hillside, she found a note slipped under the door, written in a spidery hand. "Leave the past alone, Mrs. Reed, for your own good." The paper was unsigned, but the warning was clear. Gwenda's hands shook as she tucked it into her pocket, resolving not to tell Raymond yet. She needed more answers before fear could stop her. That night, as she lay in bed, the house seemed to hum with secrets. The vision returned, clearer now. The woman at the stairs, the man's voice snarling, "Lily!" But a new detail emerged, a child's sob echoing from above. Gwenda sat up, her breath ragged. The child was her, she was certain, and the name Lily was no mistake. It was a clue, pointing to someone or something she had yet to uncover. Rose, lighting a candle, and crept to the hall. The staircase gleamed in the flickering light, its curves unchanged from her vision. She touched the banister, her fingers tracing the worn wood. "What did I see?" she whispered. The house offered no answer, but Gwenda felt its weight, as if it were waiting for her to find the truth. Tomorrow she would face Dr. Kennedy, armed with Mrs. Cocker's story and Miss Marple's counsel. But as she returned to bed, the note's warning echoed, "For your own good." Gwenda shivered, pulling the blankets tight. The past was stirring, and she sensed it would not rest easily. Chapter 4. Shadows in Dilmouth. The late October sun hung low over Dilmouth, casting a golden haze across the town's tiled roofs and cobbled lanes. Gwenda Reed walked purposefully towards the high street, her coat buttoned against the crisp air, her mind a whirl of questions. The anonymous note from the previous evening, "Leave the past alone, Mrs. Reed, for your own good," lay folded in her pocket, its spidery script a silent taunt. She had not shown it to Raymond, whose growing unease about her inquiries already bordered on exasperation. Instead, she carried it like a secret, its warning fueling her resolve to uncover the truth about Hillside and Helen Halliday's disappearance. Her morning had begun with a quiet determination to follow the leads from Mrs. Cocker and the church records. Dr. James Kennedy, Helen's brother, was her next target. Mrs. Cocker's words about his possessive devotion to Helen echoed in Gwenda's mind, mingling with the vision of the strangled woman and the child's sob she now believed was her own. But first she needed more context, someone who could flesh out the Hallidays' life at Hillside. Mrs. Cocker had mentioned a housemaid, Lily Kimball, who had worked at Hillside during Helen's time and left abruptly after her disappearance. Finding Lily, or anyone else who remembered those days, was Gwenda's goal. She started at the post office, a squat building with a red door, where the postmistress, Miss Tilling, was known for her encyclopedic knowledge of Dilmouth's residents. The bell above the door jingled as Gwenda entered, and Miss Tilling looked up from sorting letters, her spectacles glinting. "Mrs. Reed, isn't it? Settling in at Hillside, I hear." Gwenda smiled, leaning casually on the counter. "Trying, too. It's a lovely house, but I'm curious about its history. Do you know anyone who worked there years ago, around 1907 or 1908? A maid named Lily Kimble, perhaps?" Miss Tilling's fingers paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. Lily Kimble? My, that's a name from the past. She was a housemaid for the Hallidays, if memory serves. Left Dilmouth not long after Mrs. Halliday vanished. Folks said Lily was nervy, always looking over her shoulder. She married a farmhand, Tom Kimble, and moved to a village near Plymouth. I don't know if she's still there, mind, but you could try the parish records at St. Michael's. They track marriages and such. Gwenda thanked her, jotting down the details. The mention of Lily's nervousness piqued her curiosity. Had she seen something at Hillside? Something that drove her away? Before leaving, Gwenda probed further. What about Dr. Kennedy? I hear he was close to the Hallidays. Miss Tilling's lips pursed, a flicker of caution crossing her face. Dr. Kennedy's still at Cliff House, up on the ridge. Keeps to himself these days, but he was thick with his sister Helen. Too thick, some said. When she went missing, he was like a man possessed, questioning everyone, searching the cliffs. Never believed she ran off, or so I heard. He's not one for visitors, though, so you'd best have a good reason if you call. The postmistress's tone suggested more than she said, and Gwenda filed it away. She left the post office and headed for St. Michael's Church, where the parish records might confirm Lily's whereabouts. The churchyard was quiet, its gravestones tilted by time, and the air smelled of damp earth and yew. Inside, Mr. Tuttle, the clerk from her previous visit, was polishing a brass candlestick. He greeted her with a nod, his wiry frame bent over his task. "Back again, Mrs. Reed. More questions about Hillside?" "I'm trying to find Lily Kimble," Gwenda said, keeping her voice light. "She was a maid there when my father lived at Hillside. Miss Tilling thought the parish records might help." Mr. Tuttle sat down, his cloth, and led her to the vestry, where a leather-bound register lay on a table. He flipped through its pages, his finger tracing names. Here we are. Lily Kimble, married Thomas Kimble, August 1908, at St. Peter's in Woodley, a village 10 miles east. No address listed, but the Kimbles were tenant farmers there last I knew. Lily's likely still in Woodley, unless she's moved on. Gwenda memorized the details, her excitement tempered by the note's warning. "Did you know Lily, or the Hallidays?" "Not well," Mr. Tuttle said, closing the register. "Lily was a quiet girl, skittish-like. The Hallidays kept to themselves mostly. Mrs. Halliday was a charmer, always singing, but there was a sadness to her. Her brother, Dr. Kennedy, was often at Hillside, watching her like she might break. After she vanished, the house felt cursed. No one stayed long after that." His words sent a chill through Gwenda, echoing Mrs. Cocker's unease about Kennedy. She thanked Mr. Tuttle and stepped into the churchyard, her mind racing. Lily Kimble was a tangible link to Hillside's past, but Dr. Kennedy loomed larger, a man whose shadow seemed to stretch across Helen's life. Gwenda decided to visit him that afternoon, despite Miss Tilling's caution. Raymond was tied up with the solicitor until evening, but she couldn't wait. She needed to see Kennedy's reaction to her questions, to gauge if he hid something. Cliff House was a half-hour walk from the church, perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the sea. The path wound through gorse and bracken, the wind carrying the cry of gulls. Gwenda's heart thudded as the house came into view, a stark red-brick structure with tall chimneys and windows like unblinking eyes. Its garden was a tangle of nettles, the gate rusted on its hinges. She hesitated, the note's words flashing in her mind, but squared her shoulders and knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing a tall, gaunt man in his 60s, his hair a steely grey, his eyes a piercing blue that seemed to strip her bare. "Yes," he said, his voice clipped with a trace of irritation. "Dr. Kennedy? I'm Gwenda Reed from Hillside. I believe you knew my father, Major Halliday, and his wife, Helen. May I speak with you?" Kennedy's expression flickered. Surprise, perhaps, or something colder. He stepped aside, gesturing her into a dimly lit hall. "Come in, Mrs. Reed. I don't often have visitors, but I can spare a moment." The drawing-room was sparsely furnished, its walls lined with medical texts, and a single photograph of a young woman with golden hair. Helen, Gwenda guessed. Kennedy motioned to a chair, his movements precise, like a man accustomed to control. "What brings you here?" he asked, sitting opposite her, his hands clasped tightly. Gwenda chose her words carefully, sensing his wariness. "I'm trying to learn about Hillside's history. I was born there, but I don't remember it. I understand you were close to Helen, my stepmother. Can you tell me about her?" Kennedy's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained even. "Helen was my sister, and yes, we were close. She was spirited, full of life, but reckless. Her marriage to your father was a mistake. He was too rigid, too old for her. When she left, it was no surprise. She always craved freedom." His tone was measured, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Left?" Gwenda pressed, her pulse quickening. "People say she vanished. Didn't you look for her?" Kennedy's hands tightened, his knuckles whitening. "Of course I looked. I scoured the town, the cliffs, everywhere. But Helen was headstrong, induced me. She wanted to disappear, she would. I warned her about the company she kept. Men who flattered her turned her head. She didn't listen." His voice grew sharp, then softened. "It's an old wound, Mrs. Reed. Why reopen it?" Gwenda met his gaze, her courage bolstered by his defensiveness. "Because I think something happened at Hillside. I've remembered things. A woman at the stairs, a name, Lily. I need to know if it's true." Kennedy's face hardened, his eyes like flint. "Children's fancies," he said curtly. "You were barely 3 when you left. Memories from that age are unreliable. I suggest you leave the past alone. It's kinder to your father's memory, and to you." He stood, signalling the end of the conversation. Gwenda rose, her cheeks flushing. His dismissal was too quick, too forceful. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. As she left, she felt his gaze on her back, heavy and unyielding. Outside, the wind whipped her hair, and she hurried down the path, glancing over her shoulder. A shadow moved at an upstairs window, and she quickened her pace. Back in Dilmouth, she stopped at a tea-room to collect herself, her hands trembling as she sipped a cup of weak tea. Kennedy's reaction had been telling. His anger, his insistence on Helen's recklessness. He was hiding something, she was sure. But what? And why had he warned her to stop, echoing the note's threat? She pulled the note from her pocket, studying its script. It was different from Kennedy's precise hand, but the sentiment felt too similar to be coincidence. As she paid her bill, a woman at a nearby table caught her eye. Mrs. Erskine, a neighbour who had welcomed her to Hillside with a basket of scones. Gwenda approached, seizing the chance for another perspective. "Mrs. Erskine, do you remember the Hallidays at Hillside? Or a maid named Lily Kimball?" Mrs. Erskine, a plump woman with a cheerful face, nodded eagerly. "Oh, yes, I knew of them. I was just a girl then, but the Hallidays were talked about. Helen was a beauty, always laughing, but there were whispers she was unhappy. Lily Kimball worked for them, a shy thing, always scurrying about. She left right after Helen did, married quick and moved away. Some said she knew more than she let on, but that's just gossip." "Did you ever hear about Dr. Kennedy?" Gwenda asked, keeping her tone casual. Mrs. Erskine's smile faded. "He was Helen's brother, very protective. Too much, my mother used to say. He'd visit Hillside almost daily, arguing with Helen sometimes. After she vanished, he was like a ghost himself, wandering the town, asking questions. He's still here, but he's a loner now. Best not to bother him." Gwenda thanked her and left, her mind a tangle of clues. Lily Kimball, Dr. Kennedy, the note, all pointed to a secret buried at Hillside. She decided to write to Miss Marple, who had promised to stay in Dilmouth a few more days. At a stationer's shop, she bought paper and penned a note. "Dear Miss Marple, I've learned more about Helen and met Dr. Kennedy. He's defensive, and I received a threatening note. I'm planning to find Lily Kimball in Woodley. Could we meet tomorrow? Yours, Gwenda Reed." She posted the note to the vicarage and returned to Hillside, where Raymond was waiting, his face lined with worry. "Where have you been?" he asked, drawing her into the parlour. "I was about to send out a search party." Gwenda recounted her day, omitting the note, but sharing her visit to Kennedy. Raymond's expression darkened. "Gwenda, this is madness. You can't just barge into people's lives asking about a disappearance from 20 years ago. What if Kennedy's dangerous?" "He's hiding something," she insisted. "I felt it. And Lily Kimball might know what. I'm going to Woodley tomorrow to find her." Raymond sighed, rubbing his temples. "Not alone, you're not. I'll come with you. But if this leads nowhere, promise you'll let it go." Gwenda nodded, though her heart rebelled at the thought. As they dined, the house seemed to listen, its silence heavy with unspoken truths. That night, she dreamed of the staircase again, but this time the woman's face was Helen's, her eyes pleading. Gwenda woke with a start, the name Lily on her lips. Tomorrow she would follow the trail to Woodley, with Miss Marple's wisdom and Raymond's reluctant support. But the note's warning lingered, a shadow she could not shake. Chapter 5. The Maid's Letter. A thin drizzle veiled the rolling hills beyond Dilmouth as Gwenda Reed and her husband Raymond boarded the morning train to Woodley. The carriage was nearly empty, its windows streaked with rain, and Gwenda sat by the glass, her reflection pale against the grey countryside. The anonymous note, "Leave the past alone, Mrs. Reed, for your own good," burned in her memory, though she had kept it hidden from Raymond, whose scepticism about her quest was already a strain. Dr. Kennedy's cold dismissal the previous day, coupled with the townsfolk's guarded hints about Lily Kimball, had only sharpened her resolve. Lily, The former housemaid at Hillside was a living link to Helen Halliday's disappearance, and Gwenda was determined to find her. Raymond, leafing through a newspaper, glanced at her. "You're awfully quiet, darling. Still brooding over that doctor's nonsense?" Gwenda forced a smile, adjusting her hat. "Not brooding, just thinking. Lily Kimble might know something about Helen, something no one else will say. I can't let it go, Raymond. Not yet." He sighed, folding the paper. "I know you're set on this, but I wish you'd be careful. Digging up old scandals could upset people. People who don't want to be upset." His tone was gentle, but Gwenda sensed his unease, a quiet plea to return to the normalcy of their new life. She nodded, unwilling to argue, and turned back to the window, where the fields blurred into mist. The train rattled into Woodley, a sleepy village of stone, cottages and a single spire piercing the fog. Gwenda and Raymond disembarked, their umbrellas bobbing as they followed a muddy lane to the post office, where the clerk, a ruddy-faced man named Mr. Higgs, confirmed Lily Kimble's address. "She's Mrs. Thomas Kimble now," he said, scratching his chin. "Lives at Willow Farm, just past the mill. Keeps to herself, mostly, since Tom passed last year." "You kin to her?" "No, just an acquaintance," Gwenda said, avoiding his curious gaze. She thanked him, and they set out, the rain pattering on their umbrellas. Willow Farm was a low, weathered house, its thatch sagging, and its garden a tangle of brambles. Gwenda's heart quickened as she knocked, the sound echoing in the stillness. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her late 30s, her face lined beyond her years, her dark hair streaked with grey. Her eyes, wary and deep-set, flicked between Gwenda and Raymond. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low, with a trace of the local burr. "Mrs. Kimble. I'm Gwenda Reed, and this is my husband, Raymond. I believe you worked at Hillside years ago, for the Hallidays. I'd like to talk about them, if you don't mind." Lily's expression hardened, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "That's old history. I don't care to rake it up." She began to close the door, but Gwenda stepped forward, her voice earnest. "Please, it's important. I lived at Hillside as a child, with my father, Major Halliday, and Helen. I'm trying to understand. What happened to her? You might be the only one who can help." Lily hesitated, her gaze softening slightly. After a long moment, she sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in then, but don't expect much. I've no love for those days." She led them into a cramped parlour, its air heavy with the scent of damp wood and lavender. A single chair sat by a smouldering fire, a sewing basket at its side. Lily motioned to a worn sofa, her movements stiff as if bracing for an ordeal. Gwenda sat, clasping her hands. "Thank you for seeing us. I know it's been a long time, but anything you remember about Helen or Hillside could help. I've had strange memories, things I don't understand." Lily's eyes narrowed, studying Gwenda with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Memories, you say? You were just a mite back then, toddling about. What sort of memories?" Just hesitated, glancing at Raymond, who was watching Lily intently. A woman at the stairs, hurt, a man's voice saying "Lily," and other things, wallpaper, a stone in the garden. I think I saw something when I was 3, something about Helen. Lily's face paled, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. "That's a queer thing to remember," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't like talking about Hillside. It was a bad place after Mrs. Halliday went, but since you're here, I'll tell you what I know, and then you leave me be." She leaned forward, her eyes darting to the window as if expecting someone to peer in. Mrs. Halliday, Helen, was kind but restless, always singing, but her eyes were sad like she was caged. The Major was away often, and she'd wander the cliffs alone. Her brother, Dr. Kennedy, was always there, watching her, telling her what to do. I didn't like him. Too cold, too controlling. The night she disappeared, I saw her in the garden, wearing a blue dress, arguing with someone. Couldn't see who. It was dark, but their voices were sharp. Next morning, she was gone. The Major said she'd run off, but I never believed it. Gwenda's pulse raced. Why not? Lily's voice dropped lower. "Because of you, miss. You were her pet, always clinging to her skirts. She'd never have left you behind, not without a word. And there was something else." She paused, her hands trembling. "I found a scarf of hers, torn in the shrubbery a week later. I gave it to Dr. Kennedy, thinking he'd want it. He took it and told me to forget I'd seen it. His eyes were like ice. I left Hillside soon after, married Tom, and tried to put it behind me." Raymond shifted, his skepticism surfacing. "A scarf doesn't prove anything. She could have dropped it, or someone took it to make it look like foul play." Lily's gaze hardened. "Maybe. But I wrote to Dr. Kennedy years later, after Tom and I settled here. I'd heard nothing of Mrs. Halliday, and it nagged at me. I asked if he'd ever found her, or if she was dead. He never answered. That's when I knew he was hiding something." Gwenda leaned forward, her voice urgent. "Do you think Helen was killed?" Lily's eyes flickered with fear. "I think someone wanted her gone, and they made sure she was. Whether it was Dr. Kennedy or another, I can't say, but I've kept my mouth shut all these years, and I'm only telling you because you're her stepdaughter. Now please go. I don't want trouble." Gwenda sensed Lily's fear was real, a weight carried for decades. "Thank you," she said softly. "I won't bother you again." She and Raymond rose, but as they reached the door, Lily spoke. Again, her voice barely audible. "Be careful, Mrs. Reed. If you're right about what you saw, someone might not like you remembering." The warning hung in the air as they stepped into the rain, the farm's gate creaking shut behind them. Raymond took Gwenda's arm, his face grim. "That woman's scared half to death, and I don't blame her. This is getting out of hand, Gwenda. You're stirring up ghosts, and I don't like it." Gwenda pulled her arm free, her eyes flashing. "They're not ghosts, Raymond. Helen didn't run away. She was taken, or worse. Lily's story proves it. I'm going to tell Miss Marple, and then I'm going back to Hillside to look for more clues." Raymond's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right, but I'm not letting you do this alone. We'll see Miss Marple together." They caught the next train back to Dilmouth, the carriage's rhythm lulling Gwenda into uneasy reflection. Lily's words about the scarf, the argument, Kennedy's silence, fit too neatly with her own memories. The name Lily in her vision wasn't the victim, she realized, but the witness, the maid who had seen too much. And Kennedy's refusal to answer Lily's letter suggested a man with secrets to protect. In Dilmouth, they found Miss Marple at the vicarage, seated, In the parlour with a cup of tea and a book of sermons. Her eyes lit up as Gwenda entered, though her smile held a trace of concern. "Mrs. Reed, Mr. Reed, how good to see you. Your note reached me this morning, and I've been expecting you. Tell me, what did you learn in Woodley?" Gwenda recounted Lily's story, her voice steady despite the weight of it. She described the blue dress, the torn scarf, and Kennedy's chilling dismissal of Lily's letter. Raymond, standing by the window, added little, his silence a quiet protest. Miss Marple listened, her hands folded, her gaze distant but sharp. When Gwenda finished, Miss Marple nodded slowly. "This is grave indeed. Mrs. Kimball's account suggests foul play, and Dr. Kennedy's behaviour is most suggestive. A man who ignores such a letter has something to conceal. But we must be cautious. Fear, you see, is a powerful motive, and Mrs. Kimball's fear is telling. She believes herself in danger, even now." Gwenda's throat tightened. "You think someone might hurt her?" Miss Marple's eyes met hers, calm but unyielding. "I think, my dear, that you have disturbed a nest of secrets. The note you received, and I'm glad you mentioned it, though you kept it from your husband, points to someone who knows you're asking questions. It may be Dr. Kennedy, or another who fears exposure. You must be vigilant, both of you, and Mrs. Kimball as well." Raymond spoke at last, his voice clipped. "This has gone too far. Gwenda, you're putting yourself and others in harm's way. I want you to stop." Gwenda turned to him, her cheeks flushing. "I can't stop, Raymond. Not when I'm this close. Helen was my stepmother, and I saw something. I owe it to her and to myself to find out what." Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Reed, your concern is natural, but Mrs. Reed's instincts are sound. The past has a way of demanding its due. However, I agree that caution is needed. Mrs. Reed, I suggest you search Hillside for any traces of Helen's life. A diary, a letter, anything she might have left. And I shall make discreet inquiries about Dr. Kennedy's movements after Helen's disappearance. The church fete gives me an excuse to chat with Dilmouth's older residents." Gwenda nodded, grateful for Miss Marple's support. "I'll start tonight. There's an attic we haven't explored. It might hold something." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "An excellent idea. Attics are like memories, full of forgotten things waiting to be found. But do take your husband with you. 2 pairs of eyes are better than one." They left the vicarage as the rain eased, the sky a bruised purple over the sea. At Hillside, Gwenda and Raymond climbed to the attic, a low-ceilinged space thick with dust and shadows. Boxes of old linens and broken furniture crowded the floor, but Gwenda's attention was drawn to a small trunk, its leather cracked, its lock rusted. With Raymond's help, she pried it open, revealing a jumble of papers, photographs, and a child's rag doll. Among the papers was a letter, its ink faded, but legible, addressed to "My dearest Kelvin" in a flowing hand. Gwenda's breath caught as she read, "I cannot stay, not with him watching always. I fear what he might do if I try to leave. Take Gwenda and go, before it's too late. Yours, Helen." The letter was undated, but its urgency was unmistakable. Raymond's face paled as he read over her shoulder. "Good God, Gwenda, it's proof she was afraid. But who's him? Kennedy?" "I don't know," Gwenda whispered, clutching the letter. but it's enough to keep going. That night, as they sat by the fire, Gwenda felt the house's silence like a presence. The letter, now locked in her desk, was a beacon in the Peibu dark, illuminating Helen's fear and her own purpose. But Lily's warning and the anonymous note lingered, a reminder that the truth came with a price. Chapter 6. The Garden's Secret. The morning sun broke through Dilmouth's lingering mist, casting a soft glow over Hillside's overgrown garden. Gwenda Reed stood on the terrace, her hands clasped tightly, the weight of Helen's letter from the attic pressing against her thoughts. The words, "I cannot stay, not with him watching always. I fear what he might do," had burned into her memory, each syllable a plea from a woman who had vanished. Gwenda's resolve to uncover the truth had hardened, despite Raymond's, pleased to let the past lie, and the anonymous note's chilling warning. Lily Kimball's account of Helen's final night, the torn scarf, and Dr. Kennedy's silence pointed to a darkness buried at Hillside, and Gwenda was determined to find its source. Raymond emerged from the house, his fair hair tousled, a mug of coffee in hand. "You're up early," he said, his tone cautious, as if gauging her mood. "Planning to rearrange the roses or chase more ghosts?" Gwenda managed a faint smile, though her heart wasn't in it. "The garden, actually. I want to clear that sunken corner near the fountain. There's something about it, the stone with the heart carving. It feels important." She didn't mention the letter, now hidden in her desk, or the growing certainty that her childhood vision of a strangled woman was tied to Helen's fate. Raymond's brow furrowed, but he nodded. "All right, but I'm hiring gardeners today. This place is a jungle, and I don't want you exhausting yourself. I'll tell them to start there." He hesitated, then added, "Gwenda, I'm worried about you. This obsession, it's changing you. Promise you'll take it slow." "Tim, promise," she said, though the words felt hollow. Raymond's concern was a tether, grounding but restrictive, and she chafed against it. As he returned inside to telephone the agency, Gwenda wandered to the garden's edge, where the broken fountain stood sentinel. The carved stone, half buried in weeds, seemed to pulse with secrets, its heart and arrow etching a silent clue. She knelt, brushing away dirt, and felt a chill unrelated to the morning air. The stone was loose, as if it had been lifted before. By midday, 2 gardeners arrived. Mr. Phipps, a wiry man with a sunburned face, and his young assistant Jem. They set to work in the sunken corner, their spades slicing through tangled roots. Gwenda watched from the terrace, her pulse quickening as they cleared the undergrowth. Phipps called out, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Reed, you'd best see this." She hurried over, her boots sinking into the soft earth. Beneath the carved stone, now fully exposed, lay a shallow hollow. In it, glinting dully, was a small rusted locket, its chain tangled in the roots of a long dead rose bush. Gwenda's breath caught as she knelt, her fingers trembling as she lifted it. The locket was heart-shaped, engraved with the initials HK in a delicate script. She opened it, revealing a faded photograph of a young woman with golden hair. Helen, unmistakably, her smile bright but shadowed. Raymond, drawn by the commotion, joined her. "What's that?" he asked, peering over her shoulder. "A locket," Gwenda whispered, her voice thick. "It's Helen's. Look at the initials. HK for Helen Kennedy, before she married Father. It was buried here, under the stone I found." Phipps scratched his head, leaning on his spade. "Queer place to keep a locket. Must have been hidden, deliberate-like. Been there years, by the look of it." Jem, barely 20, piped up. "Could be someone dropped it, ma'am. Gardens swallow things up." Gwenda shook her head, clutching the locket. "No, it was meant to stay hidden. Someone buried it to keep it from being found." Her eyes met Raymond's, and she saw his unease mirror her own certainty. The locket was no accident. It was a piece of Helen's story, buried with intent. Raymond took her arm, his voice low. "Let's take it inside, Gwenda. We'll clean it up and decide what to do." In the parlour, Gwenda brushed the locket with a soft cloth, revealing its tarnished silver. The photograph inside was fragile, Helen's face a ghostly echo of the woman in her vision. Raymond paced, his hands in his pockets. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "It could have been lost, like the boy said." "It wasn't lost," Gwenda said firmly. "It was with the stone I remembered, in the exact spot that's haunted me. And the letter, Helen was afraid of someone watching her. This locket ties it all together." She paused, then added, "I'm going to show it to Dr. Kennedy. He needs to explain why it was hidden." Raymond stopped pacing, his face darkening. "Absolutely not. You said he was hostile last time. If he's involved in whatever happened to Helen, confronting him alone is madness." "I won't go alone," Gwenda promised. "I'll ask Miss Marple to come, or you can. But I need to see his reaction. He's the key, Raymond. I feel it." Raymond sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine, but we're doing this my way. We'll invite him here, with Miss Marple present. No sneaking off to that grim house of his." Gwenda agreed, relieved to have his support, however reluctant. She wrote a note to Miss Marple, detailing the locket's discovery and requesting her presence at Hillside the next day. As she sealed the envelope, a knock at the door startled her. It was Mrs. Bates from the vicarage, her face flushed from the walk. "Miss Marple sent me, Mrs. Reed," she said, handing over a folded letter. "She's been at the fete all morning, but wanted you to have this straight away." Gwenda thanked her and opened the letter, her eyes scanning Miss Marple's neat script. "Dear Mrs. Reed, I have learned something troubling from a Mrs. Fane, an old resident who knew the Hallidays. She recalls Dr. Kennedy's intense attachment to his sister, bordering on obsession. He was seen arguing with Helen at Hillside the week she vanished, and Mrs. Fane believes he resented her marriage. I urge you to avoid him until we can speak. I shall call tomorrow at 11. Yours sincerely, Jane Marple." Gwenda's stomach twisted as she showed the letter to Raymond. "This confirms what Lily said," she whispered. "Kennedy was controlling. Helen, maybe enough to do something terrible." Raymond's jaw tightened. "All the more reason to wait for Miss Marple. No heroics, Gwenda. Promise me." She nodded, though her mind raced. The locket, the letter, and now Mrs. Fane's story were threads weaving a pattern she could almost see. That afternoon, she and Raymond walked to the post office to send her note to Miss Marple, the locket tucked safely in her purse. Dilmouth streets were quiet, the fate's banners fluttering in the breeze. Gwenda's eyes scanned the faces. They passed, half expecting to see Kennedy's gaunt figure watching from a corner. At the post office, Miss Tilling, the postmistress, greeted them with her usual curiosity. "Back again, Mrs. Reed. You're keeping me busy with your letters." Her spectacles glinted as she took the envelope. Gwenda seized the chance to probe further. "Miss Tilling, you mentioned Dr. Kennedy before. Did you ever hear anything odd about him and Helen Halliday? Anything that stood out?" Miss Tilling's lips pursed, her hands pausing over the stamps. "Well now, I don't like to gossip, but since you ask, Dr. Kennedy was peculiar about his sister. Always at Hillside checking on her, even when she was married. My cousin, who nursed for him, said he kept a room full of Helen's things. Photographs, letters, even her old dresses. Like a shrine, she called it. After she vanished, he never spoke her name again, but he'd sit in that room for hours. Queer if you ask me." Gwenda's skin prickled. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the chill running through her. As they left, Raymond took her hand, his grip firm. "That's enough for today," he said. "You're shaking, Gwenda. Let's get home." Back at Hillside, Gwenda placed the locket on the mantel, its silver catching the firelight. She couldn't shake Miss Tilling's words. A shrine to Helen, preserved by a brother who couldn't let her go. The image fit too neatly with Helen's letter, with Lily's fear, with the buried locket. She resolved to search the house again, focusing on Helen's old rooms, but Raymond's watchful eye made her wait. That evening, as they dined on cold chicken and salad, a storm rolled in, thunder rumbling over the sea. Gwenda's thoughts drifted to Miss Marple, whose quiet wisdom had become her anchor. She imagined the older woman at the fete, chatting with Dilmouth's matrons, her questions as delicate as her knitting needles, unravelling secrets with every stitch. Gwenda longed for tomorrow's meeting, hoping Miss Marple could make sense of the locket's significance. After dinner, Raymond retired to the study, leaving Gwenda alone in the parlour. She took the locket, turning it over in her hands, and felt a sudden urge to return to the garden. Slipping on a coat, she stepped outside, the rain now a soft patter. The sunken corner was dark, the carved stone a pale shadow in the gloom. She knelt, her fingers tracing the heart and arrow, and whispered, "What happened to you, Helen?" A twig snapped behind her, and she spun, her heart leaping. The garden was empty, the wind rustling the trees. She hurried back inside, locking the door, her breath ragged. The house felt alive, its shadows shifting with every creak. She climbed to bed, the locket clutched in her hand, and dreamed of a woman in a blue dress, her voice pleading through the storm. The next morning, Miss Marple arrived promptly at 11, her straw hat damp from a fresh shower. Her eyes fell on the locket displayed on the parlour table, and she nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "A most significant find, Mrs. Reed," she said, her voice low. "Buried objects are rarely innocent. They are hidden for a reason, either to protect or to conceal." Gwenda recounted the discovery, Miss Tilling's story, and her own unease in the garden. Raymond, hovering nearby, added, "I want this handled properly, Miss Marple. Gwenda's determined, but I'm worried she's in over her head." Miss Marple's gaze was kind, but firm. "You are right to be cautious, Mr. Reed. This locket, combined with Mrs. Kimball's account and Mrs. Fane's recollections, points to a deliberate act. Dr. Kennedy's attachment to his sister was not merely familial. It was possessive, perhaps dangerously so. But we must not rush to judgment. I suggest we observe him closely, perhaps by inviting him here as you proposed. His reaction to the locket will tell us much." Gwenda nodded, her resolve firming. "I'll write to him today. But what if he refuses to come?" Miss Marple's lips curved in a faint smile. "Then, my dear, we shall find another way to draw him out. Human nature, you see, cannot resist its own curiosity. And Dr. Kennedy, I suspect, is a man who cannot resist knowing what you know." As Miss Marple left, promising to return for the meeting with Kennedy, Gwenda felt a flicker of hope. The locket was a key, unlocking doors she hadn't dared to open. But the garden's shadows and the snap of that twig lingered in her mind, a reminder that the past was watching, and it was not yet ready to yield. Chapter 7. The trap is set. The late afternoon light filtered through Hillside's tall windows, casting a warm glow across the parlour, where Gwenda Reed arranged a tray of tea things with meticulous care. The room, newly dusted and adorned with fresh roses from the garden, belied the tension coiling in her chest. Tonight's gathering was no ordinary social call. It was a gambit, orchestrated with Miss Marple's guidance, to test Dr. James Kennedy's composure and unearth clues about Helen Halliday's fate. The locket, engraved with HK and found buried beneath the garden's carved stone, lay hidden in Gwenda's pocket, its weight a constant reminder of the stakes. The anonymous note, "Leave the past alone, Mrs. Reed, for your own good." And Helen's desperate letter from the attic haunted her, but Gwenda's resolve was unshaken. She needed answers, and Kennedy was the key. Raymond, adjusting his tie in the hall mirror, caught her eye. "You're sure about this, Gwenda?" "Inviting. That man here, with Lily Kimball and half the town, feels like poking a hornet's nest." His voice held a mix of concern and resignation, the latter a concession to her insistence. Gwenda smoothed her dress, a soft green that steadied her nerves. "It's the only way, Raymond. Miss Marple thinks Kennedy will betray himself if we watch closely. Lily's presence might rattle him, and the others will keep it from seeming too pointed. We're not accusing him, just observing." She didn't mention the tremor in her hands or the dream that had woken her at dawn. Helen's face, pleading, at the foot of the stairs. Raymond sighed, stepping into the parlour. "I trust Miss Marple, but I don't like it. If Kennedy's dangerous, you're putting yourself in his sights. Promise you'll stay close to me tonight." "I promise," Gwenda said, though her mind was already on the evening's strategy. Miss Marple had suggested the gathering, a small, innocuous affair with local acquaintances, to create a setting where Kennedy's guard might slip. Nidiur. Guest list included Lily Kimball, reluctantly persuaded to attend, Mrs. Erskine, the chatty neighbour, Miss Tilling, the postmistress with a knack for gossip, and Mr. Tuttle, the church clerk, whose dry recollections might spark a reaction. Miss Marple would be the quiet observer, her presence a safeguard and a lens for truth. As the clock struck 5, the first guests arrived. Mrs. Erskine bustled in, her cheeks flushed, a basket of homemade biscuits in hand. "What a charming idea, Mrs. Reed," she said, surveying the room. "Hillside's looking ever so lively. I do hope you're settling in, despite all the old stories." Gwenda smiled, guiding her to a chair. We're trying. I thought it'd be nice to hear more about the house's history from those who know it best." She kept her tone light, but her eyes flicked to the door, awaiting Kennedy. Miss Tilling followed, her spectacles glinting as she accepted a cup of tea. "History, you say? Hillside's got plenty of that, though not all of it cheerful. The Hallidays were the talk of the town, weren't they, Mrs. Erskine?" Her voice carried a hint of relish, and Gwenda noted it, sensing an ally in her curiosity. Tuttle arrived next, his wiry frame stooped, his manner as reserved as ever. "Good of you to invite me, Mrs. Reed," he said, settling near the fire. "I'm not much for parties, but I reckon you're after more than small talk." His shrewd glance suggested he understood the evening's purpose, and Gwenda felt a flicker of gratitude. Lily Kimble was late, her arrival marked by a hesitant knock. She stood in the doorway, her grey-streaked hair pulled tightly back, her eyes darting nervously. "I nearly didn't come," she said, her voice low as Gwenda took her coat. "Don't know why you want me here, stirring up old troubles." She clutched a worn shawl, her fingers twisting its fringe. "You're helping me understand my past," Gwenda said softly, guiding her to a seat. "I'm grateful you're here." Lily's fear was palpable, a mirror to Gwenda's own unease, and she resolved to protect her, whatever the night revealed. Miss Marple entered last, her delicate figure almost lost in a lavender shawl, her straw hat replaced by a neat lace cap. Her eyes, pale and piercing, swept the room, lingering briefly on each guest. "What a pleasant gathering," she said, her voice mild but carrying a quiet authority. "Mrs. Reed, you've done Hillside proud." She took a chair near the window, her knitting needles clicking softly, a deceptive backdrop to her vigilance. Dr. Kennedy had not yet arrived, and Gwenda's nerves tightened as the clock ticked toward 6. She poured tea, her hands steady despite, the pulse hammering in her throat, and steered the conversation toward Hillside's past. "I've been learning about the Hallidays," she said, addressing the group. "It's strange to think I lived here as a child, but I remember so little. Did any of you know them well?" Mrs. Erskine leaned forward, eager to share. "Oh, Helen Halliday was a lovely creature. Golden hair, always laughing, though I thought she seemed restless. My mother said she was too spirited for a soldier, like Major Halliday. When she vanished, it was such a shock. Everyone assumed she'd run off with someone dashing." Miss Tilling nodded, sipping her tea. "That's what they said, but I always wondered. She was so fond of her little girl. Gwenda, that'd be you. It didn't seem right, her leaving without a trace. And the Major, poor man, was never the same." Lily Kimble shifted in her seat, her eyes fixed on her lap. "She didn't run off," she muttered, almost to herself. "Mrs. Halliday wasn't the sort. She loved the child too much." Her voice trembled, and Gwenda caught Miss Marple's subtle nod, a signal to press gently. Before Gwenda could speak, the doorbell rang, sharp and jarring. Raymond answered, returning with Dr. Kennedy, whose gaunt frame seemed to fill the doorway. His grey hair was neatly combed, his blue eyes cold but alert, scanning the room like a hawk. "Mrs. Reed, Mr. Reed," he said, his voice clipped. "I was surprised by your invitation, but I'm here." His gaze lingered on Lily, who shrank into her chair, and Gwenda's skin prickled. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Kennedy," she said, rising to offer him a seat. We're just talking about Hillside's history. I thought you might share some memories of Helen, since you were so close." Kennedy sat, his hands clasped tightly, his smile thin. "Helen was my sister, as you know. A bright spirit, but impulsive. Her disappearance was a tragedy, but I've made my peace with it. I'm not sure what more I can add." His tone was measured, but a muscle twitched in his cheek, betraying unease. Miss Marple, her knitting needles pausing, spoke softly. "It's curious how the past lingers, isn't it? Mrs. Reed has found such interesting traces of the Hallidays here. Old houses hold so many stories." Her words were innocuous, but her eyes locked on Kennedy, sharp as a blade. Gwenda took the cue, her heart pounding. "Yes, we've been clearing the garden, and we found something odd. A locket buried under a stone. It's engraved with HK. I wondered if it might be Helen's." She drew the locket from her pocket, holding it up so the firelight caught its silver. The room stilled, every eye on the small object. Kennedy's face drained of colour, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "A locket?" he said, his voice hoarse. "May I see it?" He reached out, but Gwenda pulled back, her instincts flaring. "It's fragile," she said, tucking it away. "But it had a photograph inside, a woman with golden hair. I thought you might recognize it." Kennedy's eyes narrowed, a flash of something, anger, fear, crossing his features. Helen had many trinkets. She was careless with them. It could be anyone's. His words were clipped, but his knuckles were white, and Gwenda sensed Miss Marple's quiet satisfaction across the room. Lily Kimble spoke suddenly, her voice shaking but clear. "It's hers. I saw her wear it, a heart with her initials. She kept it close, always." Her eyes met Kennedy's, defiant despite her fear, and the air crackled with tension. Mrs. Erskine, oblivious to the undercurrent, chimed in. "How romantic! A buried locket like a treasure. Perhaps Helen hid it herself for a lover." Her laugh grated, and Gwenda winced, sensing the moment slipping. Miss Marple intervened, her voice gentle but firm. "Or perhaps it was hidden for another reason. Gardens, like memories, keep things safe until the right moment. Don't you think, Dr. Kennedy?" Kennedy's smile was forced, his gaze darting to the door. "I think speculation is dangerous, Miss Marple. The past is best left undisturbed." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "I'm afraid I have another engagement." "Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Reed." He nodded curtly and left, his footsteps echoing in the hall. The room exhaled, the guests exchanging glances. Lily Kimble's hands trembled, and Gwenda touched her arm, whispering, "You were brave. Thank you." Lily nodded, but her eyes were wide, fixed on the door Kennedy had exited. Miss Tilling broke the silence, her tone brisk. "Well, that was peculiar. Dr. Kennedy's not usually so jumpy. That locket must mean something to him." Mr. Tuttle, stirring his tea, added dryly, "He's always been odd about his sister. I remember him searching the cliffs after she went, like a man possessed. Never thought he'd give up so quick tonight." Gwenda's mind raced, Kennedy's reaction a confirmation of her suspicions. She looked to Miss Marple, who was gathering, her knitting, her expression serene, but her eyes alight. "You've done well, Mrs. Reed," she said quietly, as the others chatted. Dr. Kennedy is unsettled, and that is precisely what we needed. But we must be vigilant. He will not sit idly by. As the guests departed, Lily lingered, her shawl clutched tightly. "I shouldn't have come," she said, her voice low. "He looked at me like he knew what I told you. Be careful, Mrs. Reed. He's not right." She slipped out, her figure vanishing into the dusk. Raymond locked the door, his face grim. That was a success, I suppose, but I don't like how it felt. Kennedy's rattled and Lily's terrified. What's next, Gwenda? Gwenda met his gaze, the locket heavy in her pocket. We keep going. Miss Marple will help us plan the next step. Kennedy's hiding something, and I'm not stopping until I know what. Miss Marple, lingering by the fire, spoke softly. You're right to press on, my dear, but caution is our ally. Dr. Kennedy's reaction tonight was a crack in his armour. We must widen it carefully and watch for what spills out. I shall visit Mrs. Vane tomorrow. She may recall more about Kennedy's behaviour after Helen's disappearance. And you, Mrs. Reed, might search Hillside's library. Old houses often hide papers in unexpected places. Gwenda nodded, her resolve firm despite the evening's tension. As she and Raymond saw Miss Marple to the gate, the night air was cool, the stars sharp above the sea. Hillside loomed behind them, its windows dark but watchful. Gwenda's fingers brushed the locket, and she felt a surge of certainty. The trap was set, and the truth was closer than ever. That night, as she lay beside Raymond, sleep eluded her. The vision returned, clearer now. Helen at the stairs, Lay, man's shadow above her. The name Lily, a hissed accusation. But a new detail emerged, a glint of silver at Helen's throat, the locket's heart shape catching the light. Gwenda's eyes snapped open, her breath ragged. The locket wasn't just a clue, it was a witness, buried to silence its story. Tomorrow she would follow Miss Marple's advice, scouring the library for more traces of Helen's life. But Kennedy's pale face and Lily's fear lingered, a warning that the trap might ensnare more than she intended. Chapter 8. The Final Clue. The morning broke over Dilmouth with a deceptive calm, the sea a silver sheen under a pale sky. Gwenda Reed stood at Hillside's kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of tea, her thoughts a tangle of the previous night's gathering. Dr. Kennedy's abrupt departure, his face taut at the sight of Helen's locket, had confirmed her suspicions. He was hiding something, perhaps the truth about Helen Halliday's disappearance. Lily Kimball's trembling courage, her whispered warning about Kennedy's gaze, lingered like a shadow. Gwenda had barely slept, her dreams haunted by the vision of a woman at the stairs, now unmistakably Helen, her throat bruised, her eyes pleading. The locket locked in her desk, and Helen's attic letter, "I fear what he might do," were pieces of a puzzle she was desperate to complete. Raymond entered, his newspaper folded under his arm, his expression a mix of concern and fatigue. "You're up early again," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Last night was a success, I suppose, but it's left you looking like a ghost. Are you sure you want to keep pushing this?" Gwenda set her cup down, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "I have to, Raymond. Kennedy's reaction to the locket was too strong. He knows something. And Lily's terrified. I'm meeting Miss Marple this morning to plan our next move, and I want to search the attic again. There might be more of Helen's things, something to tie it all together. Raymond's jaw tightened, but he nodded. All right, but I'm coming with you to the vicarage. And no more secrets, Gwenda. That note you hid from me, it's proof. This isn't just a game. His tone softened and he touched her arm. I just want you safe. Gwenda managed a small smile, grateful for his support, however reluctant. She hadn't shown him the anonymous note. Leave the past alone, Mrs. Reed, for your own good. But his discovery of it had forced her to admit its threat. She dressed quickly, choosing a navy coat to ward off the morning chill, and they set out for the vicarage, the locket tucked in her purse for Miss Marple's inspection. Dilmouth streets were quiet, the shops just opening, their awnings damp from an overnight drizzle. As Gwenda and Raymond neared the vicarage, a police constable hurried past, his face grim. Gwenda's stomach twisted, an instinct she couldn't name. At the vicarage gate, Mrs. Bates, the housekeeper, met them, her eyes red-rimmed, her apron twisted in her hands. "Oh, Mrs. Reed, it's dreadful," she said, her voice breaking. "Miss Marple's inside, but there's terrible news. Lily Kimball, she's dead. Found this morning in her cottage, strangled. The police are calling it a robbery, but it's too awful to think." Gwenda froze, her breath catching. Raymond's hand tightened on her arm, his face pale. "Strangled?" he said, his voice low. "Good God, Gwenda, this is exactly what I feared." Mrs. Bates ushered them into the parlour, where Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting idle in her lap, her face grave but composed. "Mrs. Reed, Mr. Reed," she said, rising, "I'm so glad you're here. This is a tragic turn, and I fear it's no coincidence. Sit, please, and tell me everything from last night." Gwenda sank into a chair, her hands trembling as she recounted the gathering. Kennedy's reaction to the locket, Lily's bold claim about seeing Helen wear it, and the doctor's hasty exit. "Lily was so frightened," she said, her voice thick. "She said Kennedy looked at her like he knew what she told me. And now she's dead. It can't be a robbery, Miss Marple. Someone silenced her." Miss Marple's eyes, pale and piercing, met Gwenda's. "I agree, my dear. Mrs. Kimball's death is too convenient, coming so soon after her revelation. A robbery may be the police's theory, but strangulation is personal, deliberate. We must assume she was killed to prevent her from saying more. Dr. Kennedy is the obvious suspect given his behaviour, but we must not leap to conclusions. Others may have had reasons to fear her knowledge." Raymond leaned forward, his voice sharp. "This has gone too far. Gwenda, you're stopping this now. Lily's dead, and you could be next. I won't let you risk it." Gwenda's eyes flashed, her grief fueling her defiance. "I can't stop, Raymond. Lily died because she helped me. I owe her the truth about Helen, about what I saw. If Kennedy did this, he has to be stopped." She turned to Miss Marple, her voice pleading. "What do we do now?" Miss Marple folded her hands, her expression calm but resolute. "We proceed with utmost care. Mrs. Kimball's death changes the stakes, but it also sharpens our focus. You mentioned searching the attic, Mrs. Reed. That is wise. Any trace of Helen's life, however small, could clarify her fate. I shall visit the police to learn what I can about Mrs. Kimball's death, and I'll speak to Mrs. Fane again. She may recall more about Kennedy's movements after Helen vanished. But you must not confront Dr. Kennedy alone. His reaction last night suggests a man under pressure, and pressure can make men dangerous." Gwenda nodded, her resolve firm despite the horror of Lily's death. "I'll start in the attic this afternoon, and I'll keep the locket safe. It's our strongest link to Helen." She hesitated, then added, "Do you think Kennedy sent the note? It feels like his voice, warning me off." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her eyes distant. "It's possible, but we must consider others. Someone else may fear your inquiries, someone we've yet to identify. In my village, I once knew a case where a threatening note came from an unexpected source, a quiet soul no one suspected. We must keep our minds open." Raymond stood, his face set. "I'm staying with Gwenda today. No arguments. And Miss Marple, if you hear anything from the police, please tell us immediately." "Of course, Mr. Reed," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle. "You are right to protect your wife, but her courage is our greatest asset. Trust it, as I do." She gathered her shawl, her knitting tucked into a basket, and left for the police station, her small figure belying the steel beneath. Gwenda and Raymond returned to Hillside, the news of Lily's death, a heavy cloud. The house felt colder, its shadows deeper, as if mourning the loss of another witness to its secrets. After a silent lunch, Gwenda led Raymond to the attic, a low-ceilinged space cluttered with trunks and cobwebbed crates. The air was thick with dust, the light dim through a single skylight. Gwenda's heart pounded as she approached the trunk where she'd found Helen's letter, its leather cracked but familiar. "Let's try the other boxes," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "Helen might have left something else, papers, clothes, anything." Raymond nodded, his reluctance giving way to quiet support, and they set to work, sorting through faded linens and broken toys. In a corner, half hidden by a rolled rug, Gwenda found a small wooden box, its lid carved with a rose. She pried it open, revealing a bundle of yellowed letters and a child's drawing, its crayon lines crude but vivid. The drawing showed a woman in a blue dress, her hair a golden scribble, standing beside a man with a stethoscope around his neck. Above them, a staircase curved, and a small figure peered through banisters. A child, unmistakably Gwenda herself, her breath caught, the image searing into her memory. "Raymond, look at this," she whispered, holding up the drawing. "It's me, watching Helen, and it must be Kennedy. I drew this years ago. I saw them." Raymond's face paled as he studied the drawing. "Good Lord, Gwenda, it's proof you were there, that you saw something. But what does it mean?" Gwenda's hands trembled as she unfolded the letters, scanning their contents. Most were mundane, notes from Helen to her husband about household matters. But one stood out, its tone urgent. "Kelvin, I saw him in the garden again last night, watching the house. I'm afraid, not just for me, but for Gwenda. We must leave soon." The letter was unsigned, but Gwenda knew it was Helen's, its fear echoing the attic letter. "It's Kennedy," Gwenda said, her voice breaking. She was afraid of him, watching her, controlling her. "And I saw it. I saw him hurt her at the stairs. The voice saying Lily. He must have thought Lily saw it too, or knew something." Her eyes filled with tears, the weight of her childhood memory crashing over her. "He killed her, Raymond. I know it." Raymond pulled her close, his voice gentle but firm. "We don't know that yet, darling. This is evidence, but we need more. Let's take these to Miss Marple. She'll know what to do." Gwenda nodded, clutching the drawing and letter, her grief for Lily mingling with a fierce determination. They locked the box and descended, the attic's dust clinging to their clothes. In the parlour, Gwenda placed the new finds beside the locket, their combined weight a testament to Helen's silenced voice. She felt a surge of clarity, as if the child in the drawing were guiding her forward. That afternoon, Miss Marple returned, her face drawn, but her eyes alert. "The police are thorough, but misguided," she said, settling into a chair. "They've found no clear evidence at Mrs. Kimball's cottage, no fingerprints, no witnesses. But I learned from Mrs. Fane that Dr. Kennedy was seen near Woodley the night before last, ostensibly visiting a patient. It's circumstantial, but troubling." Gwenda showed her the drawing and letter, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I found these in the attic. I drew this as a child. I saw Kennedy with Helen, and I think I saw him kill her. The letter says she was afraid of someone watching, and it must be him." Miss Marple examined the items, her fingers tracing the crayon lines. "This is extraordinary, Mrs. Reed. The drawing is a child's truth, unfiltered by time, and the letter strengthens our case. Dr. Kennedy's attachment to his sister was not merely protective, it was obsessive, perhaps to the point of violence. He likely killed Helen to keep her from leaving, mistaking Lily Kimball for a witness, and silencing her years later when you stirred the past." Raymond leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Then we go to the police. This is enough, surely." Miss Marple raised a hand, her expression cautious. "Not yet, Mr. Reed. We have motive and opportunity, but no direct proof. The police will need more, and Kennedy is clever. He's covered his tracks well. We must draw him out, perhaps by letting him believe you found something conclusive. But it must be done with care, lest he act again." Gwenda's heart raced, Lily's death a stark warning. "How do we do that safely?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, though her voice was grave. "We set a final trap, my dear. You might write to Kennedy, saying you found a document that explains Helen's fate, and invite him to discuss it here, with witnesses present. I shall arrange for a discreet police presence through a friend at the station. His reaction will be our proof." Gwenda nodded, her fear tempered by purpose. "I'll write the letter tonight. But what if he runs?" Miss Marple's smile was faint but resolute. "He won't, Mrs. Reed. Men like Dr. Kennedy are driven by control, and control demands knowledge. He will come to know what you've found, and that will be his undoing." As Miss Marple left, promising to contact her police friend, Gwenda sat at her desk, the drawing before her. The child's crayon lines were a bridge to her past, a testament to the truth she'd buried. She felt Helen's presence, not as a ghost, but as a call to justice. Lily's death was a wound, but it fueled her determination. The trap was nearly complete, and Gwenda would see it through, for Helen, for Lily, and for the child who had watched from the stairs. That evening, as she penned the letter to Kennedy, a storm gathered over Dilmouth, thunder rolling in the distance. The house creaked, its shadows alive with memory. Gwenda's hand steadied, her words precise. "Dear Dr. Kennedy, I have found a document that sheds light on Helen's disappearance. I believe you will want to see it. Please come to Hillside. Tomorrow at 3. Sincerely, Gwenda Reed. She sealed the envelope, her heart pounding, and placed it by the door for morning delivery. As she climbed to bed, the drawing's image burned in her mind. Helen, Kennedy, the staircase. The final clue was in her hands, and tomorrow she would face the man who had haunted her past. But the storm's rumble and the memory of Lily's fear whispered a warning. The truth was near, but its cost was yet to be paid. Chapter 9. Confronting the Past. The sky above Dilmouth hung heavy with storm clouds, their edges tinged with a sullen gold as the afternoon waned. Inside Hillside, Gwenda Reed paced the parlour, her footsteps muffled by the thick rug, her hands clenching and unclenching with nervous energy. The letter she had sent to Dr. James Kennedy, claiming she'd found a document that explained Helen Halliday's disappearance, lay on the table, its wax seal broken from her repeated readings. The words were a lure, crafted with Miss Marple's guidance to draw Kennedy to Hillside at 3 o'clock, where witnesses and, unbeknownst to him, a discreet police presence, would observe his reaction. The locket, Helen's desperate letter, the child's drawing, and Lily Kimball's murder formed a net tightening around him. But Gwenda's heart raced with equal parts resolve and dread. Raymond watched her from an armchair, his newspaper unopened, his face etched with worry. "You're wearing a path in the carpet, darling," he said, his voice gentle but strained. "Miss Marple's plan is solid, and the police will be here. Kennedy can't hurt you, but I wish you'd let me handle this meeting." Gwenda shook, her head pausing by the fireplace. "I have to face him, Raymond. It's not just about Helen or Lily. It's about me. I saw something as a child, something I've carried all these years. I need to look him in the eye and know the truth." Her voice trembled, the memory of the strangled woman at the stairs. Helen, she was certain, vivid as a fresh wound. The drawing, with its crayon image of a stethoscope-clad man, had unlocked a flood of images. A child's terror, a man's hissed Lily, a silver locket glinting in the dark. Raymond rose, crossing to her. "I know you do, but if he's as dangerous as Miss Marple thinks, you're not standing alone. I'll be right beside you, and so will she." He squeezed her hand, and Gwenda nodded, drawing strength from his touch, though the weight of Lily's death pressed against her. The maid's courage, her strangled body found in Woodley, was a stark reminder of the stakes. A knock at the door announced Miss Marple's arrival, her small figure wrapped in a grey shawl, her eyes bright with purpose despite the storm's gloom. Behind her stood Inspector Waller, a stocky man with a quiet demeanour, and a plainclothes constable, both arranged through Miss Marple's contact at the station. "Mrs. Reed, Mr. Reed," Miss Marple said, stepping inside. "Everything is in place. Inspector Waller will remain in the study out of sight with his officer. Dr. Kennedy must believe this is a private meeting, but we shall be safe." Gwenda greeted the inspector, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Thank you for coming, Inspector. I hope we're right about this." Waller nodded, his eyes kind but professional. "Miss Marple's explained the situation, Mrs. Reed. We've no direct evidence yet, but your findings, the locket, the letters, the drawing, are compelling. If Kennedy reacts as you expect, we'll take it from there. Just keep him talking, and don't provoke him unduly." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting needles clicking softly, a deceptive calm in the tense room. "You've done admirably, Mrs. Reed," she said. Your courage has brought us to this moment. Dr. Kennedy's attachment to his sister was a sickness, I believe, one that drove him to violence when she sought to escape. Lily Kimball's death was his attempt to protect that secret. But your persistence has forced his hand. Now, we must watch him closely. His words, his gestures. The truth often hides in the smallest details. Gwenda nodded, her fingers brushing the locket in her pocket. I'm ready. But what if he denies everything? Or if he runs? Miss Marple's lips curved in a faint smile. He won't run, my dear. Men like Dr. Kennedy are tethered to their secrets. They cannot resist knowing what you know. And denial is its own confession if you know how to listen. In my village, I once saw a man betray himself with a single glance. Trust your instincts and trust me. The clock struck 3, its chime echoing through Hillside. Gwenda's heart leapt as the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Raymond opened the door, revealing Dr. Kennedy, his gaunt frame silhouetted against the storm's grey light. His grey hair was slicked back, his blue eyes cold but alert, a faint tremor in his hand as he removed his hat. Mrs. Reed said, his voice clipped, your letter was intriguing. I trust this won't take long. Gwenda met his gaze, her voice steady despite the pulse hammering in her throat. Thank you for coming, Dr. Kennedy. Please, come in. Miss Marple's here, and we'd like to discuss what I've found. She led him to the parlour, where Miss Marple sat, her knitting a quiet rhythm, and Raymond stood by the window, his posture tense. Kennedy's eyes flicked to Miss Marple, a flash of irritation crossing his face, but he sat, his hands clasped tightly. Let's be clear, he said, his tone sharp. I came out of courtesy, but I've no patience for games. What is this document you claim to have? Gwenda took a deep breath, her hand closing around the locket. It's not just one document. I found several things. Letters from Helen, a locket buried in the garden, a drawing I made as a child. They all point to what happened to her, here at Hillside. She paused, watching his face. I think you know more than you've told me. Kennedy's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. You're treading dangerous ground, Mrs. Reed. Helen was my sister, and her disappearance was a tragedy I've lived with for years. Your so-called findings are nothing but conjecture, stirred up by a child's imagination. His voice was controlled, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Miss Marple spoke, her voice soft but piercing. Imagination can be remarkably accurate, Dr. Kennedy. A child's drawing, for instance, might capture a moment no adult would admit. A moment at the stairs, perhaps, with a woman in distress. Her needles paused, her gaze locking on his. Kennedy's, hands clenched, his knuckles white. This is absurd. I won't be accused by a meddling old woman and a girl chasing ghosts. Helen left of her own accord. I told you that. If you have evidence, show it, or I'm leaving. Gwenda's heart pounded, but she held her ground, drawing the locket from her pocket. This was Helen's, buried under a stone in the garden. And this letter. She produced the attic letter, its ink faded but legible. Says she was afraid of someone watching her, someone who wouldn't let her leave. I drew a picture as a child, Dr. Kennedy, of you with Helen at the stairs. Saw you hurt her, and I heard you say Lily, thinking the maid had seen it too. Her voice shook, but she pressed on. You killed Helen to keep her from leaving, and you killed Lily to keep her quiet. The room stilled, the storm's distant rumble the only sound. Kennedy's face drained of colour, his eyes wide, a man caught in a trap he hadn't seen closing. He stood, his chair scraping the floor, and for a moment Gwenda thought he'd lunge at her. But he staggered, clutching the table, his voice a hoarse whisper. You can't know that. You were a child. Raymond stepped forward, his voice sharp. Stay where you are, Kennedy. The police are here, and they've heard everything. Inspector Waller emerged from the study, the constable at his side, their presence a quiet thunder. Dr. Kennedy, Waller said, his tone even, I suggest you come with us. We have questions about Mrs. Kimball's death, and now Mrs. Halliday's. Anything you say will be noted. Kennedy's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. It wasn't meant to happen, he muttered, his eyes distant. Helen was mine. She couldn't leave me. I only meant to stop her, but she fought. And then she was gone. Lily, she knew too much, years later, when you came asking. His voice broke, a confession torn from a fractured soul. I never meant to hurt them. Gwenda's knees buckled, and Raymond caught her, his arm steadying her as tears stung her eyes. The truth, raw and brutal, was a weight she'd carried since childhood, now laid bare. Helen's death, Lily's murder, Kennedy's obsession had destroyed them all. She clutched the locket, its silver warm against her palm, a silent apology to the woman she'd barely known. Miss Marple rose, her face grave but satisfied. You've done it, Mrs. Reed. The truth is a heavy burden, but you've carried it bravely. Inspector, I trust you'll handle this with care. Waller nodded, guiding Kennedy to the door, the constable following. The doctor's steps were slow, his head bowed, a man defeated by his own secrets. As the door closed, Gwenda sank into a chair, her breath ragged. Raymond knelt beside her, his hand on hers. It's over, darling. You did it. Gwenda shook her head, tears spilling. It's not over. Helen's gone, Lily's gone, and I saw it happen. I was there, Raymond, and I couldn't stop it. Her voice broke, the child's terror flooding back, the staircase vivid in her mind. Miss Marple sat beside her, her touch light but firm. You were a child, my dear, with no power to change what happened. But you've given them justice. Now, Helen's memory, Lily's courage, they live in what you've done. The past is a heavy load, but you've set it free. Gwenda nodded, wiping her eyes, the locket a talisman of closure. The storm outside had eased, a faint light breaking through the clouds. Hillside felt different, its shadows softer, as if relieved of a long-held secret. She looked at Miss Marple, her voice steadying. What happens now? Now, Miss Marple said, her eyes kind, you heal. The police will handle Dr. Kennedy, and his confession will close the case. You and Mr. Reed will make this house your own, free of its ghosts. And I shall return to St. Mary Mead, where my garden awaits. Her smile was faint but warm, a promise of peace. Raymond stood, his relief palpable. I'll make tea. We could all use it. He left for the kitchen, leaving Gwenda and Miss Marple in quiet companionship. Gwenda's fingers traced the locket's engraving. I wish I'd known her. she said softly. "Helen. She loved me, didn't she?" "She did," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle. "Her letters, your drawing, they show a woman who cherished you. You've honoured her, Mrs. Reed, in a way few could." As Raymond returned with the tea-tray, Gwenda felt a shift within her, a lightening of the burden she'd carried since childhood. The staircase, the vision, the name Lily. They were no longer chains, but memories, part of a truth she'd faced. Hillside was hers now, not Helen's or Kennedy's, and she would make it a home. The afternoon faded into evening, the storm's last rumbles fading over the sea. Gwenda sat with Raymond and Miss Marple, the parlour warm with firelight, and felt the past recede, its echoes silenced at last. Chapter 10. The House at Peace. The early November sun cast a gentle light over Hillside, its rays filtering through the newly cleaned windows to dance across the parlour's polished floor. Gwenda Reed stood by the mantel, her fingers tracing the edge of a framed photograph, a restored image of Helen Halliday, her golden hair glowing, her smile a quiet promise. The locket engraved with HK rested in a small velvet box beside it, no longer a buried secret, but a cherished relic. Dr. Kennedy's confession, extracted in the tense confrontation 2 days prior, had unravelled the mystery of Helen's death and Lily Kimball's murder, lifting a weight from Gwenda's heart. Yet the house still hummed with echoes of the past, and she moved through it with a cautious hope, determined to make it her own. Raymond entered, a roll of wallpaper samples under his arm, his face brighter than it had been in weeks. "The painters are ready to start tomorrow," he said, spreading the samples on the table. "I thought we'd cover that ghastly primrose pattern in the hall. Something cheerful, maybe a soft blue." His tone was light, but his eyes searched, hers, alert for the shadows that had lingered since Kennedy's arrest. Gwenda smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her introspection. "Blue sounds perfect, and let's keep the roses in the garden, but tame them a bit. I want this place to feel alive." She joined him at the table, her fingers brushing a sample, the act of planning a tether to the future. The visions that had haunted her, the woman at the stairs, the hissed Lily, the child's terror, had faded, replaced by a quiet certainty. Helen and Lily had justice, and Hillside was no longer a tomb for their secrets. The past week had been a whirlwind. Inspector Waller had taken Dr. Kennedy into custody. His confession, a raw admission of killing Helen to prevent her leaving, and Lily to silence her suspicions, sealing his fate. The police had searched Cliff House, uncovering a locked drawer of Helen's letters and photographs, a shrine to his obsession. Gwenda had declined to see them, trusting Miss Marple's summary. "A sad, twisted mind, my dear, unable to let go." The news had spread through Dilmouth, softening the town's gossip into sympathy for Gwenda, the child who had witnessed a tragedy and survived to write it. This morning, Gwenda had woken with a new purpose: to honour Helen and Lily, not through mourning but by breathing life into Hillside. She and Raymond had spent the day before sorting through the attic's remaining treasures, keeping a few of Helen's books and a child's toy that Gwenda vaguely recalled. The drawing, with its crayon image of Helen and Kennedy, was stored safely, a reminder of her courage, but no longer a wound. Now, as she stood in the parlour, she felt the house shift, its air lighter, as if exhaling a long-held breath. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Erskine, the neighbour whose scones had welcomed them to Dilmouth, stood on the porch, a basket of apples in hand. "I heard about Dr. Kennedy," she said, her voice soft. "It's dreadful, but you've done a brave thing, Mrs. Reed. These are from my orchard. Thought you might like them for a pie." Gwenda accepted the basket, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Mrs. Erskine. Would you like to come in? We're just planning some changes to the house." Mrs. Erskine hesitated, then stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the parlour. "It's looking lovely already. I remember Helen here, you know, always arranging flowers, singing to you when you were little. She'd be glad to see you making it a home." Her words were simple, but they stirred a warmth in Gwenda, a connection to the stepmother she'd barely known. As Mrs. Erskine left, Gwenda returned to the wallpaper samples, her resolve firming. "Let's have the painters start with the hall," she told Raymond. "I want to walk through it without remembering." The primrose wallpaper, once a trigger for her visions, would be the first to go, a symbolic cleansing. Raymond nodded, his relief palpable. "And I'll get the gardeners back to finish that sunken corner. No more buried secrets." He pulled her into a brief embrace, and Gwenda leaned into him, grateful for his steadiness through the storm of the past weeks. By midday, Gwenda felt a pull to visit St. Michael's Church, where the records had first confirmed her connection to Hillside. She wanted to light a candle for Helen and Lily, a quiet act of remembrance. Raymond, busy with a solicitor's call, encouraged her to go. "Take your time, darling. I'll be here when you get back." The walk to the church was brisk, Dilmouth streets alive with the chatter of market stalls and the tang of salt from the sea. Gwenda's navy coat shielded her from the autumn chill, and her steps were lighter than they'd been in weeks. At St. Michael's, the churchyard was peaceful, its gravestones softened by moss. Inside, the air was cool, scented with wax and old wood. Mr. Tuttle, the clerk, was arranging hymnals, his wiry frame bent over a pew. "Mrs. Reed," he said, looking up with a nod. "Heard about Dr. Kennedy. A bad business, but you've set things right. Come to see the records again?" Gwenda smiled, shaking her head. "No, just to light a candle, for Helen Halliday and Lily Kimball. They deserve to be remembered." Tuttle's eyes softened. "Aye, they do. There's a side chapel just there. Take your time." He gestured to a small alcove where a rack of votive candles flickered. Gwenda lit 2 candles, their flames steady in the dim light, and whispered a silent prayer, not formal but heartfelt. "Helen, Lily, I hope you're at peace. I won't forget you." The act was simple, but it anchored her, a bridge between the past and the life she was building. As she turned to leave, she noticed a small plaque on the chapel wall, dedicated to those lost to the sea. It felt fitting, a nod to Helen's staged disappearance, and Gwenda touched it lightly, a final goodbye. Outside, she met Miss Tilling, the postmistress, carrying a bundle of letters. "Mrs. Reed, you're the talk of the town," Miss Tilling said, her spectacles glinting. "Not that I listen to gossip, mind, but folks say you're a hero, uncovering what happened to poor Helen. And Lily, God rest her. If you ever need a friend in Dilmouth, my door's open." Gwenda thanked her, warmed by the unexpected kindness. The town, once a maze of secrets, was beginning to feel like home, its people allies rather than strangers. She walked back to Hillside, the candle's glow lingering in her mind, a symbol of closure. At the house, a letter awaited her, delivered in Miss Marple's absence. The handwriting was familiar, and Gwenda opened it eagerly, settling into the parlour to read, "Dear Mrs. Reed, I am back in St. Mary Mead, where my roses are in sore need of pruning. But I could not leave Dilmouth without writing to you. You have shown remarkable courage, my dear, in facing a past that might have broken a lesser soul. Helen and Lily have their justice, thanks to you, and Hillside is yours to shape. I have no doubt you and Mr. Reed will fill it with joy. Dr. Kennedy's trial is set for next month, and Inspector Waller assures me his confession is ironclad. I shall not attend, as my garden calls, but I trust the law will do its work. As for you, Mrs. Reed, remember that the past is a teacher, not a chain. Live boldly, as Helen would have wished. If you ever find yourself in St. Mary Mead, my cottage is modest, but my tea is excellent. Until then, I remain, yours sincerely, Jane Marple." Gwenda's eyes misted as she folded the letter. Miss Marple's words a balm to the lingering ache of her journey. The older woman's quiet wisdom had guided her through the darkest moments, and this farewell felt like a blessing. She tucked the letter into the velvet box with the locket, a keepsake of both Helen and the ally who'd helped her find the truth. Raymond joined her, sensing her mood. "From Miss Marple?" he asked, glancing at the envelope. "Yes," Gwenda said, her voice soft. "She's back home, but she believes in us, in Hillside. I want to make her proud, Raymond. Let's make this house a place of light, not shadows." Smiled, pulling her close. "We will, and we'll invite her to see it once the paint's dry and the roses are tamed. She's earned a front row seat." That afternoon, Gwenda and Raymond walked through Hillside, room by room, planning its transformation. The library would hold their books, the dining room would host friends, and the staircase, once a trigger for terror, would be adorned with family photographs, a new history to overwrite the old. Gwenda paused at the hall, where the primrose wallpaper still clung, and imagined it gone, replaced by a colour that spoke of hope. As evening fell, they sat in the garden, the sunken corner, now cleared, its carved stone reset as a bench. The air was crisp, scented with earth and sea, and Gwenda felt a peace she hadn't known since arriving in Dilmouth. The locket, the drawing, the letters, they were no longer burdens but touchstones, proof of her strength. Helen's love, Lily's courage, and Miss Marple's guidance had carried her here, to a house at peace. The stars emerged, sharp above the cliffs, and Gwenda leaned against Raymond, her heart steady. Hillside was theirs, its secrets laid to rest. Tomorrow the painters would come, the garden would bloom, and Gwenda would write to Miss Marple, promising a visit to St. Mary Mead. For now she breathed deeply, the past a quiet memory, the future a canvas of her own making.